The first vice president of the Venezuelan United Socialist Party of Venezuela, Diosdado Cabello, emphasized that the recent sanctions imposed by Canada against Venezuelan officials represent nothing more than a failure. In Ecuador, the government said that this Thursday will be the last day without electricity after almost 3 months of power outages. And in the early hours of Thursday morning, the armed forces of Yemen launched several short-range ballistic missiles in the direction of the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, which caused the activation of alarms in the region. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. In Venezuela, the first vice president of the United Socialist Party, Diosdado Cabello, emphasized that the recent sanctions imposed by Canada against Venezuelan officials represent nothing more than a failure.
Canada imposes new sanctions against Venezuelan officials. Canada is lagging behind because they only do what the government of the United States tells them to do. The US government sneezes and then Canada gets nervous. They don't realize that it has really failed. The method has failed.
Cabello also condemned the U.S. Embassy's questioning of Venezuela's constitutionality, considering that the U.S. appointed an illegitimate president in the country and tried to overturn the constitution.
Embajada de los Estados Unidos. El 10 de enero.
According to the U.S. Embassy, January 10 is the deadline for Nicolás Maduro. Refusing a democratic transition, they say, will be the definitive rupture with the constitutional order and will plunge Venezuela into an even deeper crisis. It is funny when they talk about the constitution in Venezuela, when they appointed a president here and tried to tear that constitution to shreds. And they'd still approve boycott to that man. And they came up with a horrible thing called transitional statute, which derogates the Constitution. You look in that Constitution to see if a statute can derogate it, and it does not appear anywhere.
Última hora, Alberto wrote news. Última hora.
Last minute, Alberto wrote news posted a last-minute note from the European press that says the European Union is preparing more sanctions against Nicolás Maduro for lack of democratic transition in Venezuela. Remember that we are sanctioned. You don't need to sanction us again. You will make a fool of yourselves. Yes, because they might try to do it. What happens is that the United States has taken some new sanctions and they go after the United States. They do whatever the United States government says. They don't even think that the people who decided to impose the sanctions are going to live. 10 days after Nicolás Maduro and his people are sworn in, the President of the United States is sworn in. Exactly 10 days later. Here it is January 10, and there it is January 20. So they don't know what to do because they depend on the United States.
On the other hand, Cabello pointed out that what happened in Venezuela on July 29th after the elections had already been predicted by Commander Hugo Chavez, who always feared the intentions of the extreme right.
At that time, Chavez showed his concern and kept warning us. They were going to kill the revolutionaries. Wasn't that what they did? And wasn't that what they did on the 29th? Didn't they look for the Venezuelan women to kill? And they ended up killing 2 women? And they did it in a very mean way, with hatred, as they know how to do. And why did they do it? To spread fear. Then came the persecution. Then came the persecution of anyone who was a Chavista. But they didn't count on the sharpness of the Chavistas. This happened on day 29, and on day 30, we were.
We stay in Venezuela. The Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean informed on Wednesday that Venezuela leads economic growth in the Latin American region. The report indicates an increase in Venezuelan GDP of 6.2% by 2024, followed by South American nations such as Paraguay, Brazil, Peru, and Uruguay. Meanwhile, at the opposite extreme are Argentina, Ecuador, and Bolivia. Central American nations showed less notable figures, with the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, and Honduras standing out. Meanwhile, in the English-speaking Caribbean, the economy with the best record was Guyana. Regional growth in the year up to date is expected to be 2.2%, and in 2025 it is projected at 2.4%. Members of various social organizations gathered in the Murillo Square of Bolivia to celebrate the Day of the Democratic and Cultural Revolution. In celebration of the first electoral victory of the Movement to Socialism, MAS, in 2005, groups of citizens gathered in La Paz city, the Bolivian capital. The date commemorates the social and historical struggles of the farmer, indigenous, and intercultural organizations for a better future. This great mobilization takes place within the framework of a call made by the MAS's board of directors to the Bolivian people. Let's take a short break, but first remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Ecuador, the government said that this Thursday will be the last day without electricity after almost 3 months of power outages. A second-generation ship is expected to arrive on the shores of Guayaquil this Thursday to help generate electricity. Since September 23rd of this year, Ecuador has been facing prolonged blackouts that have lasted up to 14 hours a day in the midst of the drought. In this context, questions have been raised about the government's lack of timely action to address the situation. In Mexico, Mexican women, searching mothers and relatives of femicide victims began a hunger strike in front of the Chiapas state government building on Wednesday, demanding justice for the disappeared. The 12 leaders of the group began an indefinite hunger strike until the governor and the attorney general respond to their demands for search and justice. In a symbolic act of protest, the members of the collective Mothers in Resistance positioned themselves in front of the government with banners, posters, a coffin with photos of the disappeared women and men. The Executive Secretariat of the National Public Security System reported that between January and October 2024, 667 femicides were registered in Mexico, 21 of which occurred in Chiapas. Peru's National Civil Defense Institute reported on Wednesday that 182 districts in the highlands are at risk of being affected by landslides due to possible heavy rains. According to the authorities, the southern department of Ayacucho has the highest number of districts at very high risk. In addition, another 83 districts in the same regions are at high risk of being affected. In view of this situation, the civil defense urged local and regional authorities to check the evacuation routes are clear, as well as the availability of health centers, fire departments, and police stations in their jurisdictions. It also recommended the population to protect and reinforce the roofs of their homes. A Royal Australian Air Force plane arrived on the island of Vanuatu carrying aid packages and personnel to assist in the rescue of people in that South Pacific nation after being hit by a violent earthquake. After unloading the cargo, the airplane transported Australian citizens from the capital port of Bella and tourists back to Australia. The earthquake left over 200 people injured and 9 deaths at the central hospital. In addition, after the severe damage caused by the quake to the reservoirs, the capital city was left without water supplies. The earthquake had a depth of 57 kilometers and its epicenter was 30 kilometers west of the capital of Vanuatu, where around 330,000 people inhabit in a group of 80 islands. The French government declared Wednesday a state of exceptional natural calamity in the Mayotte archipelago after the passage of Cyclone Cito, which left 31 deaths and 45 injured. On the X account, the Ministry of Overseas announced the measure to allow a faster and more efficient management of the crisis and facilitate pursuing emergency measures. The minister in charge, François-Noël Buffet, stressed the need to mobilize all resources to help and support nationals in this terrible experience. In addition to the injured and deaths, authorities reported significant damage to infrastructure as well as failures in electricity, communications and internet services.
So, the main pathologies depend on the chronology. Immediately after the wind stopped, we had to receive victims in absolute emergency, sometimes dead people. Days after the event, we have more medical pathologies, chronic diseases that do not have access to care and treatment. And this is what is really coming to the forefront, requiring the reorganization of the entire hospital.
In France, the Avignon court sentenced French citizen Dominique Pellicot to 20 years in prison for rape and chemical sedation of his former wife Gisèle Pellicot, along with 50 men he had urged to sexually assault her for 10 years. The verdicts issued Thursday against the 55 defendants range from 3 to 20 years in prison, sentencing the victim's former husband, Dominique, to the highest penalty, although after fulfilling 2/3 in prison, he could opt for probation. It is worth to remark that the defendants with lesser punishment shall not be in prison, and although all of them were charged with different crimes, the sentences handed down were less than what the prosecution requested. We have a second short break coming up, but first we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Russia, President Vladimir Putin held a press conference with a national and foreign journalists to give an assessment of the results achieved by his government during the year 2024. The head of state commented that in the context of the conflict against Ukraine, the situation is changing dramatically, assuring that every day the Russian fighters are recovering square kilometers of territory. On the other hand, Putin said he doesn't know whether the West understood correctly the recent changes in the Russian Federation's nuclear doctrine. This after a change that states that a massive attack on the country, including with cruise missiles and drones, could generate a nuclear response. On the other hand, the president explained that the Russian economy has remained stable despite external threats growing by approximately 8% in the last 2 years.
This is just about a formal and legal issue. They can arrange it as they please it inside Ukraine. But if we ever get to the point of signing the agreements, we will be able to sign only with the legitimate representatives of authorities.
Russian President Vladimir Putin stressed that Israel's occupation of Syrian territories and sending more troops is unbearable.
Russia condemns the occupation of any Syrian territory. Our position on this is obvious and is not subject to change. We hope that someday Israel will withdraw from the territories of Syria, but now it is bringing there more troops.
The Russian head of state highlighted that the BRICS is not only a platform to confront the West, but an organization where the member countries collaborate while mutually respecting their interests.
The BRICS group is not only a tool to counteract the West. We are not working against anyone. We are working for our interests, for the BRICS member countries' interests. We are not creating any confrontational agenda within the framework of the BRICS.
In the early hours of Thursday morning, the armed forces of Yemen launched several short-range ballistic missiles in the direction of the Israeli city of Tel Aviv, which caused the activation of alarms in the region. According to Al Jazeera news networks, the explosions were heard in the center of occupied Palestine and the cities of Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, causing about 1 million Israelis to head for bomb shelters. According to several sources, one of the missiles hit the Ramat Ofal airbase. In support of the Palestinian population, the Yemen army continues its offensive against Israeli targets in the occupied Palestinian territories, in addition to Israeli-linked ships in the Red Sea. In Turkey, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan urged the international community to press Israel for respecting the ceasefire agreement in Lebanon, while showing his support for the Syrian people at this harsh time for the region. On an official ceremony, the Turkish head of state warmly welcomed the Prime Minister of Lebanon, Najib Mikati, expressing his solidarity with the Lebanese situation. Likewise, on a press briefing, Erdogan stated that both nations will collaborate to support Syria, his neighboring country. Meanwhile, the Lebanese Prime Minister underscored his country continues to suffer the aftermath of the Israeli aggressive offensive. On the issue of Syria, Mikati asserted that the joint work with the Turkish government will aim at ensuring the strength of relations among the three countries, grounded on mutual respect and good neighborliness.
A new era has begun in Syria. As two important neighbors of Syria, we agree that we must work together. Stability in Syria means stability in the region.
A fire set at a coffee shop in Hanoi, Vietnam on Wednesday night has left 11 people dead, while the police detains a suspect. Vietnam's Ministry of Public Security detailed that the blaze started late Wednesday night at a three-story establishment in the capital. The authorities reported that according to initial investigations, the fire started after an argument had taken place. A man already confessed having used gasoline to spread the flames on the first floor of the premises and the staff of the cafeteria. In this context, 11 people lost their lives while 7 were injured. Reports indicate that the police will charge the arrested suspect with murder.
Around 5 to 6 motorbikes were burning fiercely, blocking the entrance. About 15 minutes later, I think we saw one person using the flash of a mobile phone on the balcony of the third floor. Then we knew that there were some survivors inside. 15 minutes later, when the fire truck arrived, they used the stairs to get people out.
We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.